Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey continues the discussion as to when Shabbos begins and ends. When is Bein Hashmashos? We had seen three opinions. The Gemara will continue with its discussion of the Amoraim, who tried to explain what the different opinions of the Tanaim were. Then the Gemara will try to give a ruling as to which Tana is correct. We will not have a clear ruling. We'll have to go to Chumrah, and it will apply in a couple of different halachos, Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Tumah. That'll end the discussion. We'll talk about the 6 shofar blowings which were blown on Friday afternoon to warn people in the coming of Shabbos. The Gemara begins by comparing the last machlokas between Rabbah and Rav Yosef that we saw at the end of the daf to a different machlokas in a different sugya. In the last machlokas, Rabbah and Rav Yosef argued about the length of Bein Hashmashos. Rabbah gave a longer time, a bigger amount, and he said he used the number 3, and Rav Yosef gave a shorter amount, a smaller amount, and he used the number 2. So now the Gemara says that this is reversed in a discussion about the size of a basket or a kli which is muktzah on Shabbos. The halacha is that a very large object is not considered functional; you can't really use it, and therefore it's muktzah on Shabbos. Anything which is not functional is muktzah on Shabbos. Now, what is the size of a basket that's muktzah? Again, it's Machlokes Rabbah and Rav Yosef, but their opinions are somewhat reversed. So Rabbah says that if it holds 2 kor, which is equivalent to about 60 sa, so then it is not muktzah, it's still functional, but 3 kor and up is muktzah. Rav Yosef disagrees. Rav Yosef says no, 3 kor is also not muktzah. It's 4 kor and up, which is muktzah. Now Abaye says that there was a case where Rabbah was even more machmer. He says, I asked Rabbah, and Rabbah answered for me, said that even just 2 kor size, even just 60 sa, is too big to be functional, and therefore it's muktzah on Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, where did Rabbah get such a halacha from? So the Gemara brings a Mishnah which is talking about a similar halacha. It's talking about the halacha of tumah. Again, it's discussing the size of a basket which is too big to be functional. The halacha is not only is a non-functional object muktzah, it's also not a kli as far as that it cannot be mekabel tumah. It is immune to tumah. So what size is too big to be susceptible to tumah? So this brisa says as follows. It says a basket made out of straw, or a basket made out of reeds, or the water tank that the ships of Alexandria used to have. These are very large, and they are too big to be considered functional. They're not makabel tumah, even though they have a flat bottom and they can hold things, and they're a kli, but they're still too big to be makabel tumah. The rule for tumah is that they have to be small enough to move even when they're full and even when they're empty. So, what is the size that the Mishnah says? The Mishnah says a container that can hold 40 sa of liquid, which is equal to 60 sa, or 2 kor, of dry substances. Now, dry substances you can fit more in because you can heap them above the rim. So up to 60 sa, which is 2 kor, that's considered to be too big. So here you see, like Rabbah said, that 60 sa is already too big, and therefore would be muktzah on Shabbos as well. Now Abaye makes an interesting observation over here. He says we see that it could hold 40 sa of liquid and 60 sa of dry that can be heaped. So you see that the amount that you can heap is 1/2 the content of the object itself, of the vessel itself, which is 1/3 of the total amount when it is fully heaped. This is important because if somebody sells a heaping kli full, then the amount is 1/2 larger than the maximum that it can contain within itself. Now the Gemara returns to the discussion of when Bein Hashmashos is. We had earlier defined it as long as the sky is red in the east. So now the Gemara says it's not actually the east, it's actually the west. And the exchange that brought us to this realization is between Abaye and Rava. There's 2 different versions of this. Either Abaye observed that Rava was looking westward to see if the sky was still red, or Rava observed that Abaye was looking eastward. But either way, Rava said to Abaye, it's not in the east, it's in the west. And if it's in the west, why does it say the east? So it doesn't actually say the eastern sky. It says Pnei Mizrach, the face of the east. So Rava says it means the face which causes the east to be red, meaning the western face of the sky, which casts the light upon the eastern part of the sky and makes it red. The example that's given in the Gemara is a window. the sunlight shining through a window casts light on the wall opposite the window. In the same way, the sunlight shining through the western face of the sky, where the sun has just set, casts redness on the eastern edge of the sky. But the eastern edge is difficult to see the redness. It's far and it's dim, and there's all kinds of weather phenomena in between that may interfere. So it's better to look at the western sky and see if it's red, and then that's where you'll really know whether there's redness being cast on the eastern sky or not. Okay, now the Gemara returns to the Mishnah, which had three different opinions as to how far Bein Hashmashos is. We already discussed Rav Yehuda's opinion. Now we get to Rav Nachami's opinion. He had said that it's the time it takes for a man to walk half a mil. So the Gemara says, Rav Chanina says, if you want to know how long that is, so you should start at the top of Har Carmel, which is a mountain on the coast of Eretz Yisrael, near Haifa. And when you're standing at the top of the mountain, you could see the sun before it sets. You could see the sun for longer than you would if you were on the shore. But you can see the sun from the mountain at the top. And while it's still up, you should go down the mountain, be tovel. You should immerse yourself in the sea, in the Mediterranean, get dressed, and go back up the mountain. If you do that all quickly, by the time you get up to the top of the mountain, Bein Hashmashos will have ended. So that's the time of how long Bein Hashmashos is. Now the Gemara says something interesting here, tangentially about Har Carmel. The Gemara says that Reb Chia says that somebody wants to see the Be'er Shel Miriam, the rock that Moshe hit in the desert, which gave water to the Jewish people. He can see it. He should go to the top of Har Carmel. He should look out to see it, and he'll see a rock in the ocean that is shaped somewhat like a sieve. That's the well of Miriam. The Gemara also says another halacha about Be'er Shel Miriam. It is a portable well. It is a spring that gives water, but the rock moves around. So that is the halacha of a mayon in a mikvahs. It is a mayon. It is tahar, and if you go into it, it's matayari. The Gemara now goes back to the discussion of Bein Hashmashos, and the Gemara discusses the topic of Kohanim, who are going to the mikvah in order to be able to eat Truma. Now, the halacha was that a Kohen needs 2 steps in order to be Tahar. He has to go to the mikvah, and then when nightfall comes, he's Tahar. He can eat Truma. If he missed nightfall, if he went to the mikvah afterwards, he has to wait till the next nightfall the next day. So the Gemara now says that somebody who went to the mikvah during Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda is tahar once Bein Hashmashos is over. So what says, how can that be? But we don't know when during Bein Hashmashos was nightfall. So maybe he went to the mikvah after the nightfall. So Gemara says, you're right. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you wouldn't be able to eat. But if somebody went to the mikvah during Rabbi Yehuda's Bein Hashmashos, then according to Rabbi Yosi, you would be allowed to eat, because Rabbi Yehuda's Bein Hashmashos is definitely day according to Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi's Bein Hashmashos we saw in the Mishnah is a blink of an eye, and that's at the end of Rabbi Yehuda's Bein Hashmashos. So the Gemara says that is pashut. Everybody knows that. What's the chiddush in that? So the Gemara says, you may have thought that it's well known that Rabbi Yosi's blink of an eye, Bein Hashmashos, is at the end of Rabbi Yehuda's, but you may have thought that it's the last blink of an eye of Rabbi Yehuda's. It's not. It's after Rabbi Yehuda's is over. So somebody goes to the mikveh at any point during Rabbi Yehuda, even in his last blink of an eye, instant of Bein Hashmashos, when he comes out, the sun sets afterwards, according to Rabbi Yosi. Bein Hashmashos happens afterwards, and the sun sets after. Well, not the sun sets, but night falls afterwards, and therefore it counts as a tefillah and a nightfall, and he can eat Truma. Now the Gemara gives the psak here as to when Bein Hashmashos really is and what is the actual status of it. And the Gemara says the psak is, we're not sure. We have to go l'chumrah, and therefore you should follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion as far as Hilchos Shabbos, meaning you should assume that from the beginning of Rabbi Yehuda's Bein Hashmashos, which is sunset, is already Shabbos, because Rabbi Yehuda might be right, and it might be nightfall, the transition might be sometime during that Bein Hashmashos, which could be as early as the beginning of it, which is right after sunset, and therefore you already have to keep Shabbos from sunset. But as far as the halacha of Truma and going there to the mikvah, then you could use Rabbi Yosi's Bein Hashmashos, which is after the end of Rabbi Yehuda's. So now the Gemara says, how could that be? You should go l'chumrah there also. How could you let somebody go to the mikvah after Beinish Mashos and say, oh, he definitely went to the mikvah during the day, and therefore, as soon as the night falls, he can eat truma. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he missed it. Maybe night fell earlier, just like we said as far as Shabbos is concerned. So the Gemara says, yeah, you're right. I'm talking about somebody who went to the mikvah earlier in the day, and I mean that he can't eat truma until night has definitely fallen. He should wait until after the latest possible time, which is Rabbi Yossi's opinion, that night falls after Rabbi Yehuda's Beinish Mashos is all over. Okay, now the Gemara gives another way of judging when Beinish Mashos is. The Gemara says, if there's one star in the sky, it's definitely still during the day. If there's 2 stars in the sky, it's definitely Beinish Mashos. If there's 3 stars in the sky, it's night. The Gemara quotes a Brisa that says a similar thing, and the Brisa adds, not small stars, not big stars, talking about medium-sized stars. Okay. Now, the Gemara says, interesting observation. Somebody who performs a malacha on Friday, on the Beinish Mashos between Friday and Shabbos, and on the Beinish Mashos between Shabbos and Sunday. And he does it apparently either throughout the entire Beinish Mashos or at the same time in each Beinish Mashos. He certainly was Machal Shabbos at some point, because if the point that he did his malacha is Vada Yom, if it's certainly the day, so then when he did it at the end of Shabbos, he did it on Shabbos. And if it's certainly night, then when he did it in the beginning of Shabbos, he did it on Shabbos. So either way, he violated Shabbos, and if he did it by mistake, he has to bring a korban chatos. Now the Gemara says it's a smart idea to avoid getting close to the time that Shabbos begins, to stop doing malacha earlier. And therefore, Rava advised his servant, if you do not know the times of the Chachamim well, you should stop doing malacha already when the sun is at the top of the trees. You should light the Shabbos candles then. Now the Gemara says on a cloudy day, what should he do? So the Gemara says, well, there are other ways of observing. The birds always know when the sunset is. So if you're in the city, look at the roosters, and if you're in the field, look at the ravens. They start flying around when it's close to sunset, and then they settle when sun has already set and it's already nightfall. Or if you don't have birds, you can look at a type of plant called the adone, which turned with the sun throughout the day, and when it's on the edge, you know that the sun has already set. Okay, now this is the end of the discussion of sunrise and sunset, and now the Gemara talks about the blowing of the shofar, which warned the Jews that Shabbos was approaching. So the Gemara brings a brisa which says that there were 6 blowings of the shofar, 6 soundings of the shofar on Friday, spaced out throughout the day to advise people where they were in relation to the beginning of Shabbos and what they should be doing at the time. So the brisa says that the first shofar blowing was to tell people that are in the fields that it's time to stop working and time to start heading home because they needed a long time to get home. The second sounding of the shofar was for the people who had shops in the city to close the stores and to go home. They didn't have so far to go. The third one is a machlokus. Rabbi Nosson says that's it. Shabbos is here. It's time to light Shabbos candles. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said this is to tell the people who are home to take off their tefillin. And the next one is to light the Shabbos candles. But the next one was 3 in 1. They would blow tekiah, teruah, tekiah, and that shows that Shabbos has begun. According to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, they lit Shabbos candles and then Shabbos began then. Now, the space between the third tekiah and the tekiah, teruah, tekiah was enough time to roast a little fish or enough time to stick bread in the wall of the oven and that it should crust over, meaning these were the minimum preparations you would need to do when you got home in order to get ready for Shabbos. Okay, now the Gemara says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says that this is the right way to do it, but the Babylonians do it wrong. They just blow tekiah and teruah, they don't do all 3. So but the Brisa said that you have to have 6. How could they leave one out? It's only 5. It says no, they blew all 6, but instead of blowing tekiah, teruah, tekiah, they blew tekiah, and then teruah. So okay, if that was their meaning, so that was what their custom was. There's nothing wrong with them following the custom the way they had it. Now the Gemara has an Amayra. Rabbi Yehuda the Amayra told Rabbi Yitzchak, his son, they should light candles by the second sounding of the shofar. So says, but that doesn't fit with any opinion. We had that candles are lit according to Rabbi Nassan at the 3rd blowing, and according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi at the 4th. So where it changes, no, Rabbi Yehuda had actually said he told his son to light at the 3rd one like Rabbi Nassan. The Gemara now gives another brisa, which is the same brisa, just in a much more expanded and detailed form. So the brisa runs as follows. The yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel said that there were 6 shofar soundings on Friday to announce the arrival of Shabbos. The first one was sounded, and the people who were in the fields, who were plowing and hoeing, digging, and all those things, all the work in the fields, they would stop working and start heading back to the town for Shabbos. Now, those who were in the closer fields waited until those in the farther away fields came up to them, and then they all came into the city together. We didn't want the closer people to get into the city earlier, and then people who came in later would be suspected of having stayed in the fields and worked longer after the shofar was blown. Now, at this point, the Brisa says the stores were still open and all the wares were still out on trays. The trays were actually the shutters of the windows. But then the shofar blower would sound the shofar again, and the trays would all be put away, the wares would be put away, the windows would be shuttered, and the stalls would be locked. Now, everybody came home, and there was hot water on the stove, there was soup on the stove, and there was pots of Shabbos food on the fire. So they would blow again, and then everything was taken off the fire, and whatever had to be wrapped for the day meal was wrapped to keep it warm, and then they would light the Shabbos candles. Then they waited the amount of time it takes to roast a small fish or to stick bread into the wall of the oven, and he would blow tekiah to roast tekiah, and that's it, Shabbos had arrived. Now, Reish B'Chanina says if somebody didn't get a chance to light until the 6 blasts had all been sounded, he can still light the Shabbos candles because the Chachamim gave a little time for the shofar blower to put the shofar away. He would have to leave the center of the town where there was a tall tower that he blew from, and he would have to travel home with he would have to take the shofar home. It's a muktzah, and he can't carry it. So the Gemara says, the Brisa says it's not true, because if that was right, then the time that actually Shabbos began would vary from city to city, because it depends how far the shofar blower lived from the place he blew from. So that can't be right. So what actually happened was that there was a hiding spot at the place he blew, and he would hide the shofar over there, and that's it. Shabbos began right away. But there was no time after the last blowing until Shabbos hit.